Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the special meeting of the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors for July 1st, 2007. Would you all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. As I stated, this is a special meeting. Should announce, I guess, pursuant to Government Code Section 54956. There are 4 issues on today's agenda. Are there extras? Does everybody have an agenda, or are there extras here? The reason I say that is that comments will be limited to these 4 topics today. It looks like number 3 and number 4, action items for the board. And we have a presentation today first, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to turn this over to our CAO to sort of choreograph this. I don't know what you have arranged first, Tom.
Thank you, Bill. As stated on the agenda, we're going to go through 4 items today. The first item that we're going to be doing, there's a gentleman who I'd like to introduce, Gig Hightow. Gig is coming forward. He has a PowerPoint presentation to give to us. His firm was hired to do a public opinion survey of 500 registered voters in Calaveras County. That is the packet that you have. That's the voter preferences for a proposed bond measure to build a new jail. For those people in the audience, I think we've made extra copies for everybody. So we have it scheduled for you first to talk about that poll and some of the things said. Following the presentation by Gig and the board addressing the board questions, we'll move on to item number 2, which is the bond financing plan for the jail, and both of these items are informational in nature and intended for your board to ask as many questions as you feel is appropriate. And then the third item is the action item calling, the actual resolution calling for the bond election. And if your board so desires to pursue that, following that action, item number 4 is to hire bond counsel, and that is a contract that is just a simple, normal contract with a bond counsel. So that's kind of the order that we have for you today. I think all the members of the audience, we did run all copies also for board members and for the public. So I'll turn off some lights here, and then Gig will go through his presentation for us. Thank you.
I can get it, Tom.
Thank you very much. It's a be here. My name is Jake Hightow, and I'm a sociologist, and I started a research company about 20 years ago. And do a wide variety of work for big corporations, little companies, market research, work for hospitals, schools, evaluate programs, and do some benchmarking studies and election polls. And so I have done election polls in the past. In Sonoma County, in Lake County, regionally in Northern California, and several in Calaveras County as well. So I've been asked to try to sort out some of the issues about potential to have a bond measure to raise money to build a new jail. And so I try to take it in a neutral manner and find out what we can for strategic purposes. So, I did make copies of it for all of you already have that.
Yes, your copies are better copies, so yours are probably better for us to look at.
So, just part of my presentation here. We did go through 21,000 voters in Calaveras County, and we use a system of stratifying and randomly selecting people so that the 500 people represent all the 21,000 in a systematic way that's spread throughout the county geographically, but according to population density. So wherever there's lots of people, then we have lots of interviews, and wherever it's spread out, we only have a few. So we're evenly spread throughout the county by who the registered voters are. And so that makes our 500 people represent these 21,000 in a very accurate way. And so we're very proud of being able to do that. And so we have a good sample, and the results are very reliable. We go through it, we ask them one by one, we got quite a lot here, so I just wanted to show you. Okay, let's go on. So the first thing that I was asked to look at was, well, this issue about the jail's been going on, and there's been some publicity about it, but is that publicity doing any good? Well, let's find out. So the answer is yes. 70% of the people that we surveyed said, yeah, I heard about it. Now, we didn't probe that to say, well, what did you hear, to test them out. They just said yes, we said fine. Okay, but that's pretty good awareness. 70% is a good portion. Doesn't mean how much they know, but they say they heard about it. Okay, now, do the voters support the construction of a new jail? That's the basic question. But right from the get-go, it's like, well, maybe there's other things. Maybe they want something else. I mean, we discussed quite a lot of other issues that people might be more concerned about. Maybe they don't care about the jail. Let's find out. Okay, yes, they do. We asked some questions for people to say how urgent they felt these situations were. And we did ask about the jail. Now, when I was talking about, this issue when we were designing the survey, it became pretty apparent that if you ask people, do you think it's urgent to build a new jail? That's kind of a flat situation. It's like, well, I don't need a jail. Who needs a jail? Maybe the sheriffs need a jail, but I don't need a jail. So it doesn't have any context. And so I was pretty impressed with the fact that, well, the jail is not just because you have to have a building. It has to do with crime and prevention and law enforcement and everything else. And that's why you need the jail, not just because you want bigger windows or something. So we had to make the question about the consequences of the jail, not just the building, even though we're talking about building a building, but for a purpose. So we asked that in the question. We asked about this concept of the fact that jail is over capacity, so that means they're letting people out. Inmates are being released early. That people responded to very seriously. When they heard that, yeah, that is an urgent situation, a very urgent situation. We also asked some more of the consequences about a jail. The fact that there's incarceration can be an inhibitor for someone to commit crimes, and there's also people who are involved in drugs and get in trouble, and so they do treatment instead. But if they don't do well in treatment and they have to go to jail, well, they're motivated to do well in treatment. But if they don't have to go to jail, then it's like, treatment, who needs it? I'll just play the game and I'll get out of here and it won't be over. So there is definitely a link, and we tested that. And people said, oh yeah, I think that's urgent, 85%, but it was definitely down from just saying early release of inmates. So I'm going to get into what we learned about that concept as well. We asked other questions too, just other things, just to see as a benchmark how it would compare with the jail issue. So, roads, okay, that affects everybody. Well, 75% did feel like, they rated the roads as being very urgent or somewhat urgent. 61%, we tested out another issue, animal shelter, and only 34% with parks. So all of those were much less than the whole issue of the jail. Now, I just would like to refer you in your report to page 21, and you'll get this a little bit better. The way we ask these questions is on a scale. And we say, how urgent do you think these situations are? Very urgent, somewhat urgent, not too urgent, or not at all urgent. And then when we enter the information into the computer, we do it in a numeric scale so that they have a value. And then we can average the value so that even though you've got people saying, and people say everything, they're all over the place. So you average them all out to compare from one to the other as to, well, how strong is it? And so what we show here is that the issue of inmates being released early is way over to the right here on the urgent side at a 3.46 out of 4.0. And the issue about stopping crime and incentive for drug treatment is also way on the right side here, but definitely a step back. And then when we get to roads, okay, now we're just talking somewhat urgent on average, so it's really dropped. And then the animal shelter is more, not even at the 3 level, it's more closer to the middle, which would be 2.5. So it's just kind of in the middle there, and then parks is even on the negative side in terms of not too urgent at all. So that's how all that compares. So the answer is, do people really care about the jail, or do they care about other things? No, I think they do care about the jail. Okay. I have some quotes intermixed here, and I'm going to refer you to this at the end of the presentation too. We did encourage people at the end of all our very technical, difficult questions that we made them think about to say, is there anything else that you would like the Board of Supervisors to consider? And people have a lot to say. So these are some of them. And as you can see, there is definitely support for a jail, and there's all kinds of different contexts that people put that in. Now we went on to a more complicated question. And this is involving not just building a jail, but the whole complex with a sheriff's operations facility and an emergency operations 911 dispatch center. So this was a lot of the discussion we had about if you go for a bond measure, how big do you go? Should we do everything we need, or should we, go for the minimum? Or what can win and what cannot win? This is a serious strategy decision, and I'm going to discuss this quite a lot. Well, we did get mixed results, and let's see. If you look on page 27. So we put this question was prefaced by a long explanation, which we read to them very carefully, that explained the whole concept of the matching funds, how much matching funds were to build a jail, and then the alternative of building the whole complex, and that the matching funds don't cover all of the complex, and that it would cost people more if they do the complex. And so we put all of these different issues in there so they understood the whole picture. And this is how they came out. 44%, despite all of that, were more interested in the full justice center than going for the minimum. But 37% just wanted the minimum. And then you have someone just say, look, no taxes for me. I don't care what you need or what you want. I'm out. So, although more people want the full justice center than anything else, it's 44%. And if you have a bond measure, you're going to get 2/3, so you're a long way from 2/3. Now, I'm going to be discussing this in a lot more issues here, because this is the poll, this is how we asked the question, and this is the answer that they gave. Now, it's not going to be exactly the same context if sometime in November they go to the booth and they see something written on there and they have to decide yes or no. They may not have all these 3 choices. They may not have all the explanations about the matching funds and all the consequences and whatever. They're just going to look at it and go, should I do that or not? So I'm going to talk about that. Again, people had a lot of comments to say, and a lot of different ideas. And I would encourage you to kind of look at that, as I say, when we get to the end of the lecture, take a couple of minutes to look through some of these comments that people made. A lot of people were thinking outside the box. They had a lot of suggestions. Now, maybe they aren't all realistic or practical or, well, good idea, but it'll never happen. But people are thinking out of the box, and they want you all to think creatively, too. Not just, okay, let's just do it. They want you to think about this, because people have lots of opinions in this county. And some are good, and some are bad, and some are all over the place. So that's why I'm trying to cover this in a lot of detail right now. So the issue is about the financial willingness of someone to want to pay for these different alternatives. Now, I'm going to get more into the financial stuff a little bit later, but in an analysis here, trying to look at, well, who are these people who are saying, I want the full center, and who are these people who are saying, just give me the jail and nothing else? Well, the ones who are saying, let's go for the whole thing, they are willing to pay for it. and the ones who are saying, "Look, just give me the jail, that's it." They're not so willing to pay for it. So you've got a mindset, different mindsets going on here. People who are saying, let's do what we have to do and let's pay for it. And people who are saying, look, I don't know, I can't afford it, let's cut that. So you've got both of those things going on here. And they correlate to what it is that they want, the choices that they would like you to make for them. Okay, now there's a couple other things. This is an analysis that I just made, just being logical. Okay. If they don't have one proposal in front of them, they don't have all these choices and consequences. Okay. And the choice is just build a jail. Okay. Well, we know we've got a very high percentage of people who feel this is an issue, and they were willing to go for the whole complex. Well, they're going to go for the jail. They're not going to say, no, I don't want a jail. They're going to go for it. And all the people who say, just give me a jail, they're going to go for it. Well, that gives you way more numbers than you need to pass the bond measure. You got it. But if you go for the full center, well, all those people who like the idea of the full center, they'll be for it. But you've got quite a number of people who are going, no, I don't think I can afford this. This is too much. We don't have. Why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? And I don't know if you're going to have the votes. But again, that's not the end of the discussion here. I want to keep going with that. The whole thing about the Emergency Operations 911 Dispatch Center. This is personal. This is where you and me and everybody, this is where we get the benefit. And if you're at home and you need to dial 911, you want it, and you want it now, and you benefit from it immediately. So the idea of having an Emergency Operations 911 Center, a new facility, this is very appealing to everybody because it's personal, and they get the benefit. A jail is like, well, criminals and sheriffs and deputies, they deal with the jail. I'm just home. I'm not involved with the jail. But the 911, now everybody's involved. So this is a big plus for people to say, oh, I'm getting something. I need this. I want this. And we didn't test this as a separate item, but I'm pretty sure that this is the main motivation why people are so, why we had 44% say, yeah, give me the whole center. It's a very big positive, it's a personal stimulus. Now, this next sentence here I've got about related facilities. I'm not sure exactly what you're going to be presented with later, but I've seen some discussion about this previous week, talking about the whole complex as related facilities. And once again, in our question, the way we asked it, we gave them very distinct choices. We could do all of this, and tell them what it is, or we could just do this. So they really have something to weigh. But if they're only seeing one thing, and it says related facilities, well, the word related sort of, that connects it. And in a very real sense, that seems logical. I mean, you're building this, this hearing room, you have related facilities. You have a bathroom, you have offices, they're related. So it seems like, well, it's all one. You have to do them one. So if the perception is it's kind of one, well, then you're not getting this choice about all this stuff versus just the minimum. So that's why I'm mentioning this. The phrase related facilities does make an implication that this is sort of like, this is the jail. You've got to have some related facilities. It's all one thing. So I think the issue, in terms of how people perceive this is going to be exactly how much discussion and detail is the public and the media and everybody kind of looks at. What are we getting? Are we getting what we need, or are we getting more than we need? I think that's going to be kind of where it's at. And so this is sort of my main point about this discussion is that it's about perception is what's being presented here. If the public's perception is that what you're trying to do is more than just what's really urgently needed, then you're going to start getting all these opinions that people have that they don't like about the government and spending money and all kinds of things that you'll see in there that people say. That kind of gets right into their fear and their loathing, and they have lots of emotions about this stuff. And so I think that's a big issue that you need to consider is what is the perception of the proposal that you're making? Is this giving you what you need, or is it just going beyond that? And here are some comments that people made, and this is just a few. Once again, there's lots of this stuff. people have voted on bond measures before, and I don't know, I personally, I don't live here, I don't know what's true, what's not true, or how much people exaggerate or don't exaggerate, but people have opinions, and they're very concerned about the integrity of how money is spent and how projects are handled. And they may be right, or they may be wrong, or they may only know pieces of the puzzle, but nonetheless, these are the opinions that people talk about out there. So again, you need to keep all that in mind when you make your decisions. And here's the fact from our poll is that 74% have done this before. They've voted on bond measures before. And so they're not coming into this totally cold, like, okay, what's the problem? What do I have to do? They're coming into this, I've done this before. I've voted on measures before. I've paid taxes before. I've had them raise money for things before. What did I get? How do I feel about that? So they have a history, and they're going to bring that history with them to the ballot box. Okay, so, you can ask questions anytime. I'm sorry.
On this last one, we haven't had any bond measures in Calaveras in the last 5 years. Is this the perception of the state bonds that they vote for?
No, this is specifically within Calaveras County.
Oh, for the school. Oh,
It could
okay.
be school, it could have been whatever, or it could be 7 years ago, or it's just, basically we're just trying to get, have you done this before, local, not state. There's definitely not state. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So now we went on to another issue, and that was, okay, this, a bond for construction is a bond for construction, and once you get it built, then you got to use it. Then you got expenses, you got staff, you got all kinds of things. You can't, where are you going to get the money for that? So the question is, well, go for that too. No. People, 49% said, give me the construction, nothing else. Whatever, however you deal with that, some other time, not now. However, almost, the same amount of people said, yeah, okay, that makes sense. If you got the building, you got to pay for everything else. So let's do that too. That's pretty, but again, it's close. And then of course you have some people who say, I don't care what you need or what you say, I ain't voting for taxes. With those numbers, the answer is pretty much no, that would not be a popular strategy. Now we try to get into, okay, let's talk about the money. How much money are people willing to vote for? Because when it comes to how much it's going to cost me, let's see, it's a good idea, but can I afford it? Okay, now these are my predictions, and this is took me a while to figure out. It's a series of different information. It starts on page 31 and goes all the way through to 38, and these numbers are on page 38. So we're looking at a bond measure in terms of the assessed value that a property owner would have on their property, and we did explain. We did in our questionnaire purposely make sure that people are conscious about assessed value. What exactly does that mean? Because we have found in the past that not everybody's totally clear on what that means or what their assessed value is. But what we did is we asked if they own property, and if they did, we asked them how long they own the property. And if they said an answer more than 5 years, we said, okay, well, what that means is that your assessed value is probably a lot less than what the current market value is. So we told them, assessed value lower than your market value. If their answer was yes, I bought property, and their answer was 2 or 3 years ago, we said, okay, that means your assessed value is pretty close to the market value. So just to help them get an idea of what's my assessed value. And so based on that figure of 100,000 in assessed value, the personal cost it would be for on their taxes at these different amounts from $10 to $30, and then calculating, well, how many people would vote for that. And as you can see in the middle there, at $20 you get 68%, which is what you need to pass a bond measure. Now, the question is, how accurate are these predictions? And that's important. And the answer is that our survey with our sample and whatever has a margin of error of plus or minus 4%. So almost everything I've been telling you up to now, I'm very, very confident that I'm really close with those numbers. In the past, I've been within 1%. So I'm really good with that. But we did have a problem with one of the questions that we asked about how much did we spend. And it was hard for people to answer, and a lot of people didn't answer, which hurts the margin of error. And it was an unfortunate thing. If we had done this months ago, I may have been able to test it out and realize we need to tweak that question a little bit. But anyway, we did have that problem, so that means that some of these percentages I'm giving you may not be so accurate. So this $20 level might not make it at 67. It's going to be close. Cutting it down, if the total amount of the bond is less than the amount of the personal impact will be a little bit less, and we'll get under $20, let's say $19. Then you get, the whole phenomenon from marketing that we're all familiar with of price points and the psychology of, the value of money and so on. And so you gain a lot of votes just by getting under 20. And so my calculations are on that range of probably between 65% and 68%. Again, right close to where you want to be. Could miss, could make it. Taking it down a little bit more to 18, my predictions were 66 to 69. So again, could possibly miss, but now we're getting a little more confident. So me personally, and knowing what I've been able to do in the past and how reliable these results are, my feeling is if you had something that was going to cost people $18 per 100,000, I would bet on that. But that's not easy to get. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to come out here, but anyway, that's where the numbers are on this. Here are some other things to consider, and that is that the people in Calaveras County are pretty idealistic and community-minded, despite some of their complaints. That 67% said, I will vote on a measure based on how it helps my community, even if my family doesn't benefit, which is key in this one, because you're talking about a jail and your family might not benefit, so will you do it? And the answer is yes, they will. So that is good. But when it comes to, okay, how much is it going to cost me? You have a majority of people who say, look, the personal cost to me, that comes more than like how many millions of dollars you're going to raise to do the project. I gotta see if I can afford it because, this hits me personally. So we've got two different things going on there. One, yes, I'm in favor of the idea, but two, how much is it going to cost me? If it costs me too much, I got to back away. All right. Now, and so this very thing, this value of, well, how much does the personal impact affect you? Yeah. Once again, comparing the people who said, look, just go for the jail and nothing else. Just get the matching funds and be done with it, not all this other stuff. You're the ones who are like, okay, how it affects me personally and the effect here, that's what I'm taking into consideration. And on the other side, the people who say, let's do the whole thing, let's get everything, let's make it all work. They're the ones who are less, less inclined to worry about, okay, how much is it going to cost me? Let's do what we have to do. And also, I also looked at, we asked people, well, have you heard about this before? And that was a clear correlation. People who've heard about the jail before were definitely, they rated the whole issue of inmates being released as being much more urgent. So, this is just sort of an informational piece, but in the context of what's going to happen between now and November, if there's this public discussion, if there's a campaign, like if the Chamber of Commerce is going to do more publicity or anything like that, and the bigger that gets, then the more people are going to realize the urgency of the situation and then be motivated to support this. But it still comes back to these, you got, a certain percentage of people who live in this county who are poor. They don't have it. And they go to the ballots and they vote no. They don't even care what it is. They have to vote no. It's not a choice for them. They're living on a subsistence level. Okay, so now we had another idea. What about a parcel tax where everybody pays the same? Well, that would be fair. After all, the issue about jail and crime, that's not about how much money you make. That's just, you live here, you know, it's everybody. That should be a fair thing. So what about that? Well, we looked at that and it didn't fly. It just had no chance. Only 60% of the voters, you know, would vote for it if it was only going to cost them $50 a year, and $50 a year isn't going to be enough to build a jail. So the estimate was maybe around 100 or something like that, and I think you need to build a jail. I don't know the exact figure, somewhere in there, and that you only had 53%. Again, it's a majority, but you need 67. You're not going to make that 53. So. It seemed like, oh, well, this is fair. Everybody should pay for it. But whoops, no, nobody wanted that. There was pretty much of there were some people who said, let's do partial tax, but there were other people who said, no, let's do partial tax. And this comment I thought was kind of interesting because it's how do you define what's fair? When is fair not fair? Well, when is not fair? When some other people can afford it more than others. That's according to this person. So. Anyway, the parcel tax, I have to tell you, that's not going to go. Well, these are my recommendations. This is not my recommendations. This is not what I think you should do. This is just what I learned from these 500 people, and you know, just if you want to see, okay, where's the votes? How do we get this passed? These are the factors that the people are telling us that will get it passed. The first thing is they've all got to know about the jail. The publicity has to be thorough and even go beyond what it has been. And it has to stick to the idea of early release of inmates. That was the hot button. And everything else, even though professionals understand the relationships between prevention and incentives and all the other factors that are related in the whole law enforcement field, doesn't help to talk about those things because people have other opinions. They don't necessarily believe it all. They don't exactly agree with all of that. And so the more you try to explain the consequences and the value of the jail, the worse it gets. Because not everybody agrees with you. So if you just stick with the one thing that hits everybody hard, early release of inmates, that's enough. People are like, oh, I don't want that. Let's get to jail. So that's straight up. The second thing is I'm saying, just build a jail. That's what the numbers show. Again, there's a lot of context as to how that would be presented and how people would perceive that, depending on the fact that they're not going to have all of the choices that they had in the poll. But if that was the way you decided to go, and that's how it was presented, that you're going to go with the absolute frugal, lowest, bottom of the line, minimum thing we can deal with here, we've got to have a new jail, but everything else that we need, we're going to just forego it for right now. We're trying to be super fiscally responsible and go low budget. Then that would have enough appeal to me. Now there's going to be more discussion here and proposal. I believe it's going to go beyond that. And again, that's why I went into all the discussion about, well, how do people perceive it in terms of this is one thing? Do we need this? Is this what we need? And so that's the choice you're going to have to make. And the whole issue of the personal cost. You got to be less than 20. When you get to 20, you're just cutting it right on the edge, and you could lose by 15 votes. It could be that close. If you get it under 20, more under 20, you get votes for every penny under 20. You get votes. And my math is the way it counts here. If you had even anything close to 18, you win. So that comes from the poll. Now, what you actually have to deal with may not be exactly fitting this, and you'll have to think about, well, how much can we do to get the votes to make it happen? And so that is my presentation, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions. But what I would really like you to do is go to page. Go to page 46, and just take 2 or 3 minutes to kind of skim through that, because we promised everybody that you would look at these, and that's part of this is part of what it's about. People really, you've got people with a lot of opinions, and they're all over the place, and some of them make sense and some of them don't, but still, you need to know how people are thinking, because they're going to be going to the ballot box, and they're going to be thinking what they're going to be thinking, whether they're right or wrong. So I'm happy to answer any more questions, and I'm just going to, I'll be here too if other things come up during discussion that you want me to come back and answer.
If you did $18 and a full facility, how would that change your recommendation?
Well, what I'm saying is that the issue of what does it cost me personally trumps the idealism.
Okay.
And so, if they can get something good for under $20, your votes are going to be there.
So are you saying that if some of the folks would go for the $18 and we target that towards the complete facility, they may erode some of the voter approval, that they'd say, well, for maybe 13 or 14, we could get just the jail, and that's what we'd rather have.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Well, when it comes down to it, they're going to go to the ballot box and vote yes or no. So they're not going to be sitting there thinking, okay, let's do this and let's do that, and it's going to cost me this and it's going to cost me that. They're just going to be saying yes or no. Yes, but what I'm saying is that if you get under 20, if you get close to 19 or less, you're going to have the votes, and so the more they can get for it, the better, especially if it says 911. Uh-oh. Yeah. I want that one.
Okay.
You know. But anything, you know, if it goes over 20, you lose some votes. And again, it's a matter of perception. Whether it's at 21 or 19 or whatever, if they think you're going for this big, you know, gigantic complex of stuff that's going to be the world's most modern facility and much more than we need in Columbia County, and you're spending too much money on too much stuff that we need, if that's the perception, then that's going to hurt you.
Did you ask people or tell people how many cells we're looking at?
I mean, beds and cells.
Cells, yeah,
No.
I meant.
No, we just strictly said overcapacity. Yeah. The questionnaire is in the back of the appendix.
Gig, how typical is it for the number of comments you got to the survey? This was a survey of opinion of 500.
Yeah.
Did you find that Calaveras County voters were more apt to give you a full spectrum of the issues there?
Well, I have to admit, my staff kind of got into the swing of the thing for comments because they were very interesting. And so when we asked for, is there anything else you want the Board of Supervisors to consider? Well, I don't know. And we would say, are you sure this is your big chance? You know, we're going to put this in the report and they're going to read it. And so they go, well, yeah, let me tell you about this, about that, and all of a sudden, yeah, we did kind of eke it out of it. So, my bad. Got a few more than we needed here, but...
It's actually very interesting, the comments, that very insightful in a lot of areas. I think the people spent a lot of time at what they were telling you and did understand the issues very well.
Well, the thing that I was impressed with, I did a few interviews too when there was a phone available, and I supervised my staff and followed what was going on. And if you look at the questionnaires, these are complicated questions, and there's all this explanation, and there's all these variables. This is not the kind of quick call you go, yeah, I'll take that one, I'll take that one. We have to read it slow. People have to think about this. Sometimes they have to say, could you read that again? You know, I mean, this was hard. So they were really, and I was impressed how many people were like, okay, well, we'll take the second one. Oh, I want the, you know, they were really thinking about it. So, you know, I mean, actually, we did have quite a number of people who said, I can't answer that, go on to the next. But for the most part, this was not just a quick, quick emotional hit. Oh, yeah. This was really like, whoa, serious finance stuff.
Now, what was your average interview? About how long did it take to go through the interview questions?
Sometimes it had to do with the interviewer style and the style of the respondents. So they varied from like 5 minutes to 10 minutes. Maybe a couple of them went over.
Okay.
But we always try to, quicker and simpler, the better, but there's lots of explanations. So I'd say the average was probably about an 8-minute interview or something like that.
Okay. And just for the board's background, how we went about this, working with GIG, working with the Sheriff's Department, the Administrative Office, we put a lot of time and thought into these questions. This was not just a cookie cutter, grab yourself a survey that was out there. We specifically tested for a number of items that we were looking for information for the Board of Supervisors to be able to make judgments on. So we spent considerable time developing these questions, and I think my point that I just want to stress over and over again is this is how the citizens of Calaveras are feeling about many levels of government, and we did get some interesting data out of this. One of the things we specifically wanted to know was about parks, because we all talk a lot about parks, and we were, I think some of us were surprised, given a choice, how low parks were compared to the other more pressing issues in the county. So,
and by the way, we put those other questions first, so people sort of wasn't in the context of talking about a jail. It was just, okay, how about the parks? You know, so they didn't even really know much about what this whole survey was about when they were answering that. So that's an extremely accurate, piece of data here. So yeah, that's interesting.
I have a couple questions, if I may. When you do this survey, at the point in which you did it, there is no campaign. It's basically like doing your initial survey before you have a campaign. It seems to me once you have a campaign, survey numbers can change rather dramatically. And it seems to me in a campaign such as this, there tends to be an organized effort in support, and there tends not to be an organized effort basically in opposition. It's more sort of hit and miss, not particularly, not an organized funded opposition. I mean, we'll see what happens in this campaign. But assuming that is the case, and you go forward, do you find that your initial survey results change significantly at election date as a consequence of the campaign, particularly when you don't have an organized opposition necessarily?
Well, it can. We found that 70% of people said that they had already heard something, and we don't know how serious that is. So that's pretty high already. So how much more you can go from that? Well, I'm sure you can go more, and you can go more thorough. And I would expect that that would improve because we have this positive correlation between anybody who heard something and how they react to the rest of the questions. As far as how my own polls have reacted in the past, a lot of the ones I've done were sort of non-controversial, and they just sort of went with the recommendation to put it on the ballot, and there wasn't even a campaign, so there was no change from the time we did the polls to the time we voted. And those are the ones where I hit a bullseye, within 1%.
Yeah.
Like, whoa! There was a case that I did an election poll for a candidate, and there was some issues about the opponents, and they tried to exploit that, and the poll was kind of wishy-washy on what that would be, and it totally backfired on them, and so they lost, and they made a big mistake trying to exploit something like that. So definitely campaigns can make a difference. I think the biggest thing that switches everything is if some fluke controversy comes out within the last 2 weeks that hits the newspaper about some scandal or something that's maybe not even related, but just somehow somebody thinks it's related. But oops, all of a sudden it's like staining the waters, and now you're not quite sure what's going to happen. So given
Given this, and this isn't going to be as non-controversial as what you just described, but it's not going to be, I don't think it will be an extremely controversial campaign.
No, I don't see that. What I see is that you've got certain issues that affect the public, and you've got a clear need, and then it's just a question of how well that's presented, and how well the options are appealing, and then the personal impact. If the personal impact is within people's parameters, then you're it's going to be close, but you're going to get it. If the personal impact is just a little bit, then you can just miss.
Okay. My second question is, since this goes on for November 6th election, which I think will be an extremely low voter turnout election, the primary for presidentials in February, and for bond measures and county supervisors in June, and then the presidential election in November of '08. Do you find that your data tends to hold true in an extremely low voter turnout election?
That's a good question.
Because I think this will be an extremely low, I think November will be an extremely low voter turnout election in November of '07.
I don't know if I really know the answer to that.
Okay. I mean, you didn't break this out by, likely to vote, certain to vote, I mean, we don't have some breakout as to...
on the financial questions, and that was all in that section that I had mentioned to you before.
Okay, well, you just handed this out, I'll read it later.
32, from like 32, 33, and 34.
Okay.
My gut feeling just tells me that you got both motivations. You have people who are, they're afraid that this is going to cost them vote and make sure they vote. But you've got such a high percentage of people who are idealistic. They vote for the community. They understand that their voice is going to matter. That this is an urgent issue, and they'll vote.
Okay.
Yeah. It does make another factor. I mean, the poll represents the whole 22,000. So if people who don't vote are some sort of different subset about that, I'm not sure. But that's why I was saying that the reliability of most of my numbers here are very good, but the reliability on that, how much would you pay, that's where I'm a little shaky, and that was partly because of the design questionnaire. We just didn't have time. We didn't realize that people were going to not want answers to those questions.
Okay.
So.
Maybe then my last question then I guess would be for County Council or Karen. If this should fail on November 6th, does the board have the ability to put it back on the ballot for June or for November of '08? Where am I?
February.
You wouldn't be able to put it on in February.
Yeah, that's too close, I think, from November. But that board would have an option to put it back on the ballot and adjust it depending on, I mean, if it failed and at 20 or whatever the number is that gets recommended or voted on out today, we could adjust it and put it back on for the June ballot or the November '08 ballot. Is that correct? Okay. Then my last question, I guess, for Dennis or council, and that is, if it should fail in November of '07 and we went back and put it back on, do the matching funds remain available to us, or is this sort of our only shot at it?
There will be a second phase of the state funding.
Okay.
It could be a few years down the road, but there is definitely built in a second phase. And quite frankly, this is a little bit, I guess, the cart ahead of the horse, because we truly will not even have our hands on a grant application until probably September. We'll have to make the application for the jail funding in January
Of '08.
But we need to be prepared. We need all
Okay.
this.
Okay, well then I guess I have one more question. Hopefully that'll finish me off, and that is, suppose this passes in November of '07, and then we file for our grant, and we are not awarded the grant, we do not get the matching funds, then what happens with the bond proceeds?
My understanding, and I asked this kind of in a different context, like, what if we get this passed and we find out we don't need all the money? I was told that the board has the ability to void whatever monies we wouldn't need and not purchase the bonds with it. So I would assume if we can't have the matching funds, the $30 million we're going to be looking for from the state, the board would have to make a decision whether they would want to build a 911 center or if they would want to void the whole thing. I mean, it's kind of I guess we would just have to sit down and stare at each other and figure it out. But my understanding is the board does have the ability not to issue these bonds.
Because it seems to me one of the issues that will come up in the campaign is if we pass this, but the matching funds are not in, are not in hand or at least committed, and the matching fund, the 30 million matching funds don't happen, then what happens with the, how many millions is this? I think it was 30 million. What happens with this 30 million then if we don't get the matching 30 million?
My understanding is
I think we're going to need an answer for that.
Well, I think the board then makes a decision whether they just
Proceed
do
or
not
not.
issue the bonds, yes.
I think Government Financial Services can answer those questions about
That
when we
completes my
pull the
questions.
bonds.
Thank you.
Can I ask one thing of Gage? I'm sorry, Steve, but the numbers that are in here, I look at them, there's an awful lot of people that seem to have gone for, we need people into drug programs, we need more of those mental health programs, that sort of thing. If we were, I know you say that just releasing people early is the hot button issue, but if we educate people on the fact that the jail is an integral part of drug treatment and mental health treatment, can we push those numbers?
Well, my personal and professional experience is you're totally right. But what I found out is that people don't have that much professional knowledge about it, and they don't think you're right. They don't agree with you. They think, I don't know about them drug users, and they just, no. There's a lot of emotions on that. It's a different issue, and I don't think that's going to help the cause. Yeah.
That just relates to a question that I had, just interrupt here, excuse me, but I see that you have, when you ask folks for other comments, you have 52 other considerations or 52 other comments regarding the jail, sheriff's department, crime and drug treatment. There's about almost 40% of these, somewhere around 18 or 20 of these 52 responses that ask specifically about, or make statements specifically about focus on the meth epidemic, focus on drugs. I don't know exactly how your questions were structured, but I'm wondering if there was a way for you to evaluate the public's perception, the relationship between jail and the drug programs. In other words, there is no incentive to take a drug program if you know you're not going to go to jail. We discussed that briefly earlier. Did your survey find an answer to that? Are people pretty well educated about the fact that we can't force people into these programs?
The answer is people disagree with that concept. Whether
Really?
they understand it or not, I don't know. But they absolutely react opposite of what you would think. They do not buy that concept. They do not believe it, and they react against it.
So there's a huge educational deficit here.
Oh, yeah. But, that's another issue.
Right. All right.
But I hear what you're saying, and the answer is no. They don't go for that. Most people don't understand that. They don't agree with that. And, when you're talking about jail, they think, you got all these, pot smokers and people like that hanging out in jail. We don't need them in jail. Let's just deal with the real criminals. They don't know all the details. They just have, some stereotypes and a few things like that, and that's all they know. Now, some people have more personal experience, and they are on both sides of the issue. They think, we need a better system and whatever. And other people say, no, give us more breaks, give us more freedom or whatever. It's all over now.
Well, I understand that, but like I say, you got almost 40% of these respondents have as their primary concern the drug and alcohol programs. They want people in them.
Yeah.
So I guess our job is to educate people that that's one way to get folks to enter into those
I think
programs.
what they're thinking is that's better than going to jail. And I don't think they're seeing the connection. Because actually one of my clients is a drug treatment center. I've been evaluating their clients for years, and I'm also evaluating drug court programs. So I understand the relationship between having an enforcement and being in the program, and being in a program and just playing the game, and being in a program and trying to change your life. So
Right, but we have people now that are refusing the program
Right.
and choosing jail
Yeah,
because they
yeah.
know they're going to be kicked out in
Yeah.
a matter of days.
Yeah, well, that was all explained to me, and when we
Okay.
tried to just put that in there, people were like, I don't know about that.
I've got a few questions, and I'm not sure whether this is the part of the agenda for them, but I'll let fly, and people can tell me whether it's going to be answered later. I'm interested in polls, but I'm also interested in what exactly do we need to accomplish what, and I think that's a lot of voters will be asking the same thing. So when we say we can maybe eke out a 68% on, say, $18 to $20, what does that get us?
Yeah, I don't know that. Well, that's not my expertise.
Actually, that would get us the jail facility, emergency operating center, 911, and the appropriate housing with the jail for the deputies and clerical and all that. It's simply a sheriff's department jail, and it's listed as a third component generally, but it's part of the same complex, emergency operating center, 911.
And a justice center in the comprehensive way it has been discussed, what would it take to accomplish?
How I always think in terms of the full justice center would be DA, probation, public defender, certainly the courts, us, pretty much everybody involved in that system.
Okay, and having that, it looks like we would need significantly more than the polls show possible. Is that your conclusion from this?
Steve, if I can answer that, in our numbers that we've generally talked about a juvenile services facility, it's not contained in any information before you, but in our long-term planning, we're looking at the potential for a new juvenile services facility costing about $9 million and a new district attorney probation facility probably in the tune of about $5 million. So at a minimum, and then you've got a law library on top of that the county is responsible for constructing that doesn't come with the new courts facility. So potentially you could be somewhere in the neighborhood of all costs, throw in some inflation, 18 to 20 million in the next few years potentially is what it would take to do a full build out of the Justice Center, of all of those different programs that are out there.
Okay, on the polling itself, I'm curious whether you had a chance to avail yourself. I've been familiar with several school bond initiatives, some of them successful and some of them very much not so. Also a number of fire district and road votes, one only last week in my district, which was narrowly defeated just to sustain roads in one of our subdivisions. I've seen statistics, polling done prior to these that actually had numbers that were this or above, still go down to defeat. And I'm curious about whether you had a chance to look at those polling numbers and calibrate this in any regards relating to those. School district most recently in their bond.
No, just stick with this as is.
Now, I think this county has some somewhat outside the normal patterns in these.
Give the polling for the Calvers uniform.
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful and instructive as to.
No, he did.
Oh, he did. Okay. Okay, so you did.
From last year.
But you didn't relate.
August and September, but no, I didn't really. There was different issues and we had different kind of questions, but I think one of the only questions that was saying was something like, do you own property, and that came out to be the exact same number. So.
One of the things I noticed in that was that when the school districts went from a general concept to a very specific one, it raised the results between different bond initiatives. And the last one was successful to some extent because it had something for each area and it was very specific and people related to it no matter where they lived. I'm wondering whether the same concept might be put into this. And I'll be specific. If you look at the electorate in this county, it is disproportionately seniors. That relates to some extent to fixed incomes, but it also has a certain number of interests that may or may not be related to jail construction. I wonder whether facilities that, and I know this is outside of what we're considering, but I think sometimes when you build a broader coalition of interest, you get a better response, even if people have questions about a jail. Some of the same people on fixed income that don't feel insecure about their safety considerations do feel insecure about not having their senior center survive another year, and some of those kinds of questions that bring a greater demography and a high voting population into play. I don't see anything of that nature in this poll, but since you've done other polls, do you see any value to that?
Well, yes. I mean, in the one we did last year for the school bond, there was a lot of the questions were specifically designed for saying, okay, well, what can we learn in terms of how do we campaign and get these issues across? And so from the minute we did our last interview, I was emailing and faxing results to the strategists immediately, and they were replying to them immediately. And I don't know if that vote came down so close they couldn't even tell you on election day when they had a recount to even get it.
I remember.
But so I'm pretty certain that if they hadn't done everything they could have done to get the right messages to the right people and so on, that they probably would have lost. From this, the surprising thing that I found out was that the issue with crime and drug treatment and the whole thing is that it seems to me that you're better off not getting into too much detail. It's better off to keep it simple and just hit the thing that people care about the most, and that's it. But it's still a question of, in terms of what they're paying for, what they're getting, and how that's going to benefit the community. The more people have more detail on that, I think that will help.
One last question. I've had a chance to skim through this, and it looks like there may be some regional differences on what's the most important in different areas, and also what people's economic considerations, the weight that they give community versus personal economics. Do you care to comment at all about that?
Well, it didn't do a lot on that, but it's set up to do that, and I'd be happy to sort of run those numbers if someone says, like, what about in this town and that town? I want to know where people are at. I could just do that quite easily. It's just part of my consulting work here, but I didn't put all that. I think it was one area, I think, that I did analyze it by the cities.
Yes, I read that.
I'm just trying to, there's a lot here, and I figured I'm not going to just pad this over hundreds of pages of numbers that are going to enjoy it. I just want to try to focus in on what you needed to know. But anything else like that, I'll be just happy to run in and see what we find out. So that's all possible.
That's all the questions for now.
Thank you, Steve. Rita, did you have some more? Okay. Russ, do you have any comments?
Just a few. I would like very much for this to pass, but it's a little disheartening with the comments being so unfavorable about the Board of Supervisors. Should we stay out of this?
Well, I mean, the issue of integrity is big, is very, very big in this county. And so, personally, I don't think we should stay out of it, but I think we really, have to assure everybody that you're doing the right thing and you stand for what you stand for, and there's not going to be any bait and switch and shenanigans or anything like that. This is all straight up. This is going to be a good thing, and let's get everybody on board and be true to your word. I mean, that's people who've been here for many, many years, and they've been scarred one way or another 20 years ago or 15 years ago or whatever, and they don't forget. So. Personally, I'm the kind of person that says, well, if I screw up, here's what I did. Here's where I stand, here's where I'm for. So, we didn't really ask those questions. They just came up with it.
Maybe you can help us with our public relations.
Actually, I think I'd be fairly impressed with all those comments. Only about a half a dozen people use
What the survey says are from what district? Anything further?
No.
Is there any member of the public or staff or other agency that would like to make comment regards just item number 1, which is the discussion of the results of the public opinion survey regarding the bond measure? Yeah, Ward? Yes, please come up to the podium. State your name for the record, please, and sign in.
My name's Ward LaValle. I'm from San Andreas, and I just have a question regarding methodology on the sample.
Okay.
Did you call back, or did you adjust the sample afterwards?
We called that when we had a system whereby if we asked somebody, we did our little intro to do it, and they said, "Oh, I'm busy. Call me back tomorrow," or something like that. Yes, we did call back.
Okay, but outright refusals were not. Did you try to turn around refusals, and did you adjust the sample afterwards to take into that? Or, in other words, the definition of randomness is everybody has an equal chance to take the survey. So you use a telephone survey, so automatically your sample is skewed. What methods did you use to normalize that? And that's all.
Okay. We always tried to overcome resistance. So when people say, "Oh, I'm not interested," we would just say, "Well, this is your chance. This could affect you personally." We do try to get the refusers to change their mind, but we basically gave it one chance of going back in the papers and said, no, forget it, I'm not interested. So we did also issue answer machines, and people were screening their calls or whatever. We have a method where it depends if it was a voicemail or if it was an answer machine. So if it was a voicemail, we know that's just a digital thing in some computer somewhere. So
did you do any weighting to the sample afterwards to try to make up for whatever you felt was not the non-random nature of the sample? That's where the real shenanigans came. You didn't do that, that's good. Okay.
Thank you, Ward.
But we do everything we can to try to get a valid sample to overcome resistance. And we do with the answer machines, for home answer machines, we try to get people who may be screening to pick up when they're screening, and we got a few of those. We also had a situation which kind of threw me when I went to register of voters to get this list, because I wanted to make sure I had every household. So when we call a household, we would try to get people. And it turns out that there's a bit of a system about the precincts, depending on a person's last name, where there's someone in the same household could be in a different precinct. And I was like, oh no, why didn't you do this to me? And so this is why we had it organized this way. And we did have like one or two cases where we were trying to get someone in a household, and they said, oh, so-and-so's a registered voter. We go, oh no, I don't have him on my list. Well, then he's a registered voter. So hold on, we found it.
Believe me,
so we did everything we could to try to make it valid and to overcome resistance. And no, there was no waiting or switching things to prorating or anything like that.
Hey, thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation. It was concise. A lot of information there, and Tom, I'm a little bit confused here, pardon me, but this is not listed as an action item, although your memo asks for the board to make a determination if there's sufficient information to call for ballot measure on item number 1 here. So I'm not quite sure where we are on that.
Officially, it's listed on the agenda, discussion of results of public opinion survey regarding bound measure for New County Jail and related sheriffs. So it's just a discussion. Everything is preparatory toward item number 3. So if we can, we'll move forward now.
Move on to item number 2.
Item number 2.
Which is a discussion of bond financing plan for the New County Jail facility and related sheriff's facilities.
Okay, we're going to switch team members here in a little bit. Coming forward to the table.
Okay. Coming in off the bench here.
Coming in off the bench, we have with us Jonathan Edwards from Government Financial Strategies. Most of you will remember Jonathan from all of our work relating to the Angels Camp and a number of other financial issues with the county. They are our advisor on many issues. Lori Ranieri is here, is the president of the firm, and she's at the podium to also, as we go through this presentation for you today. So we're just going to deal with the technology issues first. We're going to attempt to use the same laptop, but we're going to attempt to use that using a different package here. Let's see if we're successful. Yep. looks like we're going to do this. I might mention for the board that the county's debt advisory committee, because we've been moving so quickly on this issue, we did not have a chance to formally meet in person, but yesterday at 3 o'clock, we did have a telephone conference call with the Government Financial Strategy and all members of the team from the Debt Advisory Committee, and including Supervisor Callaway. We did go over this presentation, review some concerns. So this has been presented to our Debt Advisory Committee as part of what we're doing here today. So I'll turn the time over to Jonathan and Lori, and they can take us through the actual hard numbers of what we're talking about here today. Jonathan?
Good afternoon. I'm Jonathan Edwards from Government Financial Strategies. I'm the Director of Planning there. And of course, you all know Lori Mary, the President of our firm. And in a strange twist, Lori's actually flipping my slides today. So I do want to first acknowledge the tremendously hard work that was done by the Debt Advisory Committee, and department heads and town staff to get us to this point. And just as another aside, I believe there was a question earlier about a potential election in February. I'm not an election expert, but I believe the deadline is 88 days, which I think would be the Friday of the week after the election. So it's a pretty tight time on 2 days. But I think that theoretically, based on the February ballot, but I certainly defer to count staff on that. So we're here to talk about a potential bond measure, and I'll go through some information on bond funding needed, as provided by county staff, an overview of bonds and property taxes in general. We'll talk about the bond measure financial plan in particular here, and discuss the next steps. And I will try to be brief, unlike in this situation. As you can see here, we have a conference room and people are passing out. And the caption is, to keep meetings from running indefinitely, conference rooms at Zartec Industries will allocate only a 45-minute air supply. Certainly trying to less than 45 minutes. In terms of bond funding needed, we started with information provided by county staff. There was a July 2006 cost estimate for the adult detention facility or jail of about $32 million. We were told to adjust that up to $40 million to account for inflation through today. The projected or potential state funding for that particular project is 75% or $30 million. So basically we would need, under that analysis, $10 million of local proceeds to match the state funding. In addition, there are bond proceeds budgeted for the sheriff's facilities, emergency operations center, and 911 dispatch of $14 million, and $6 million budgeted for infrastructure development, for a total bond proceeds required of $30 million. Well, the first thing about a bond is a loan. So it's basically a loan. And with a bond, a bank or underwriting firm would lend money to the county, which would provide the sheriff and jail facilities, which would benefit the community. And then the community would repay that loan on behalf of the county. So that's how a bond works. Some information about general obligation bonds, and this is very, very similar, pretty much the same thing as the school bonds that were referred to earlier. They're often referred to as a full faith and credit bond, and that's because they have unlimited taxing authority. Those two concepts are together. What that means is that with this type of bond, the community is pledging its full faith and credit to the repayment of the bond. And what that really means for taxation purposes is that although today we'll talk about projected taxes, and we'll talk about the methodologies we use to be conservative with those projections, because we certainly would like taxes to be lower than projected, theoretically the taxation would be unlimited to repay the bond. That's why it's called a full faith and credit bond. That's why this kind of bond is one of the safest bonds available. And again, this is exactly the same for the school district's general obligation bond. For a county, our bonding authority is limited to 5% of our total assessed value. What that means is that at any given point in time, the total principal amount of bonds that we can have outstanding cannot exceed 5% of our total assessed value. As you'll see later, that's not going to really be an issue for us. We would be responsible for the ongoing administration of the bond, taxation collection, and handling of the debt service of bond payments. And with this type of bond, we have no political discretion. We cannot exempt senior citizens, we cannot exempt certain types of parcels. This is a general property tax type tax. It's just like Proposition 13 type taxes for 1%. We can't exclude anyone from that. We can't exclude anyone from this.
Well, actually, as you know, and in Norfolk, the county treasurer provides this information to people who ask. There are many programs for people to receive an exemption for property taxes in all of their property taxes, including these taxes, if they're low income, disabled veteran, things like that. You know that. That's part of your regular program. But there's no special exemption related to this bond. It's not as if somebody could say, I like everything the county's doing but the jail, so I don't want to pay my jail tax. It's part of the general property taxes, and that'll all be handled by the Treasurer Tax Collector's Office once the bond is successful.
And I skip this point, but the basis for taxation with this type of bond is ad valorem. That means according to value, according to property value. So again, it's going to be based on assessed value, just like general property taxes are based on assessed value. Bonds mean property taxes. When the voters approve a general obligation bond measure, they're authorizing the county to issue the bonds and agreeing to repay those bonds or that loan through property taxes. Very roughly speaking, the property taxes are determined each year by dividing the bond debt service or bond payment for that year, divided that by the total amount of assessed value in the county. And then each particular property pays its pro rata share based on its assessed value of the bond payment. So for example, a property with an assessed value of $200,000 will pay twice as much as a property with an assessed value of $100,000. Understanding tax rates and tax levies. In California, tax rates are normally expressed in cents per $100 of assessed value. That is how it appears on the property tax bill. For convenience, in a situation like this, tax rates are often translated into a levy per $100,000 of assessed value, just to get numbers that are a little bit more easy to digest. However, the reference to taxes per $100,000 of assessed value can be misleading. Because it's likely that many properties have an assessed value which is higher or possibly lower than $100,000. Therefore, it's very important that when we talk about this tax and we communicate it to the public, that we don't just talk about $19 or $20, but that we talk about $19 or $20 per $100,000 of assessed value. If a person has a parcel with an assessed value of less than $100,000, they will pay less than that tax levy. And if they have an assessed value more, they will pay more. And of course, just to conclude on that, the assessed value of the property is typically less than its market value. Typically less. Looking at our bond sizing, first of all, we started out with our cash flow projects of $30 million. There are a number of other components that go into issuing bonds. One is underwriter's discount. That is similar to points on a mortgage. The higher the underwriter's discount, the lower the interest rate, and vice versa. So that's not really an additional cost. It's typical that underwriters want an underwriter's discount, but in exchange they give us even lower interest rates. So again, similar to points on a mortgage. Bond insurance. What that is there are a handful of companies in the United States who are so well funded that they have a AAA credit rating from the major rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, you may have heard those names. In exchange for an upfront fee, they will basically co-sign on the bond, very roughly speaking. And they will basically promise to pay the investors should something happen, a calamity happen, and the county be unable to pay the bonds. Should there be a disaster here or something. They will promise to repay that. Therefore, bondholders feel very secure, and therefore the bond itself, our loan, gets a AAA rating. It would be like paying someone who had an 850 FICO score, which is perfect, to co-sign your loan. The benefit is that the taxpayers will save more in interest as a result of the low interest rates than they will pay in the fees. So it's not really an additional cost. It actually saves us money to buy that. If it didn't, we wouldn't. And we always run an analysis before any bond sale. Okay? And then we have other costs, which are mostly professional costs, bond counsel, legal counsel on this, financial advisor, rating agency fees. I think that's a conservative estimate. And then we've rounded that. Bonds must be issued in $5,000 denominations, and we've rounded the borrowing size to $31 million. And this is our projected debt service, which again, this is like the projected payments. This is like the projected payments on the bond, and this is basically the payment structure. Now we were working with a couple of constraints. One was we were trying to have, as you'll see in a moment, the maximum projected tax levy per $100,000 of assessed value be no more than $20. As you heard before, that was a constraint we were trying to work under. We were also working under a legal constraint that when structuring how the loan payments would work, that the maximum difference between the highest loan payment and the lowest loan payment couldn't be, in this case, more than about $1.55 million. So the way that we had to work the loan payments was to look like this, which was essentially the bond payments, the loan payments, would essentially be increasing for a little more than the first half of the 30-year bond term, and then would flatten out. So this is a 30-year bond term. As you can see, the first actual payment there, when it rises up to only $1.5 million, is in 2008-09. So that's actually when the first bond payment would be due, at the end of 2008-09, and our taxation would start with the 2008-09 tax roll, not the current year tax roll. So the taxation would start next tax year. Now, we've talked about our bond payments. The other thing we talked about in determining tax rates was it's the bond payments divided by our assessed value. So let's talk about our assessed value. This is a chart showing our historical growth in assessed value for the county's total secured assessed value. And as you can see, over the last 9 years, and on the y-axis there, the heading there is, I apologize, that's a typo that was corrected in the handout copy you have. This total secured assessed value. Over the last 9 years, the tax-based growth in the county has been very strong, and it's averaged about 10% over that 9-year period. So that's our historical tax-based growth, and that's what we want to look at to project tax-based growth going forward so that we can project taxes. Okay, let's talk about first the reason the total assessed value can change. Well, pursuant to Proposition 13, the tax base can change for 4 reasons. One, properties are sold and then they get reassessed at the sale price. Another reason is that properties are improved and then those properties are reassessed with the value of the improvement. Another reason, a common reason, is that simply that a year passes. If you're living in a house and you don't do any improvements to it, major improvements, then basically your assessed value will go up by the lesser of 2% or the change in the California Consumer Price Index. And most years since Proposition 13 was enacted, the 2% figure has been applicable. There have been a few years where the California Consumer Price Index was less than 2%. So that was one of the key protections that was in Proposition 13, limiting those increases. Another reason that the assessed value in the county can change, of course, is that the market value of properties declines below assessed value, in which case the assessed value can be adjusted downwards if it goes below market value. For our financial plan, we have assumed a 4% average annual growth in the assessed value. As I just discussed, the historical average over the last 9 years has been a little over 10%. So we've assumed 4%. We think that's reasonably conservative. If the actual assessed value growth in the future is higher, the actual tax levies will be lower. So that's what we certainly want that to happen. So we've assumed 4% for our financial plan. Now, just to reiterate, the tax rates are dependent on the bond payments or debt service and the assessed value. So we have increasing assessed value. We have bond payments that increase for about the first 17, 18 years of the 30-year term and then flatten out. And that leads to the following projection of tax levies. First of all, tax rates per $100. As you can see, this is the projection of tax rates per $100. The maximum is 1.971 cents per $100. I will translate to that to 100,000, but I want to make sure it's expressed in $100. The maximum is a little under 2 cents per $100 of assessed value, and the average is about 1.8 cents per $100,000 of assessed value over the 30-year term. Translating that into a levy for $100,000 of assessed value for ease of communication, the maximum projected tax levy for $100,000 of assessed value is a little under $20, $19.71, and the average is a little over $18 over the 30-year term. And I mentioned earlier was that we are subject to a bond capacity limit, which is 5% of our total assessed value. Our bonding capacity is over $300 million, so that's not going to be an issue for us to be well under capacity. In terms of the next steps, the next step would be for the board to consider an order calling for the election. If approved, the order and tax rate statement must be filed with the county clerk recorder by August 15th. One thing about the order, and I know there might be some discussion on the ballot language, but we can only end up doing the projects that are stated in the ballot language. We cannot do anything different. In terms of the tax rate statement, that's a legal document that's not subject to board approval. It simply states what the maximum average and a few other information about the tax. And it is something that gets printed in the ballot pamphlet. It just states basically the information to show you about the projected taxes. If the board should approve the order, the next step between now and election day would be for the county to provide objective information to the community regarding the bond measure, and of course November 6th is our election day. So I'm very happy to take any questions.
Any questions or comments from the board? Tom, you have any? Steve? Rita? Chris? Thank you very much, Jonathan. Pretty good. Any comments about this issue from the members of the public? It'll be item number 2 on the agenda, which is, of course, the presentation that we just saw. Very well.
Well, I guess the numbers are overwhelming. I think one point I might make for the board, I did notice in the comment, as we talked in the comments section of Gig's report, some things about what else did we survey? Did we look at other potential financing sources? The answer to that question is yes. We looked at alternative methods of financing, but for this type of project, the common thing to do is the approach we're taking, and it also is the one approach that generates sufficient funding for us to move forward with the bond measure. So that question was addressed as we went through the process. So it looks like we're ready to move on to the technical part, which is item number 3. There is, I think we have this listed as a resolution, but I don't believe it is a resolution. It is an order calling for...
Well, it says order of the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, it is an order. Is that correct, Karen? Is that the technical? Okay. Our county clerk, Karen Barney, tells us it has to be done by resolution, but it is an order calling for that election. We did have some discussion. I think we're limited to 75 words in the statement section that can go before the voters. There have been some comments that have been raised about the actual wording of what we're talking about, and perhaps Supervisor Callaway could lead that discussion a little bit. She's most familiar as being the board's representative on all of our committees about those issues that have come forward. Marita, would you mind tackling that for us?
Let me just talk about the bond issue.
The actual statement. The actual statement that goes on the ballot. There were some concerns.
You'll notice on the handout, Dennis, does the board have the changes that were made? Okay. Oh, just me. Okay.
What did you say? Just me.
Just me. Oh, we're still working on it. Okay. We have 2 options. We can massage the measure, that's what's in the box on the sheet, and approve it today, or we can give the sheriff and the CAO the authority to make the changes, the copy that we want on the bond measure has to be in by August 10th.
That's correct.
So I did have some concerns about the one that was in our board packet. I felt that, let me just see what we have. Okay, that where it said constructing new county jail emergency operations 9/11 dispatch, sort of to go back to the earliest comments that were made to keep it simple. I felt like this was getting a little convoluted. How do you define emergency operations? And must we say emergency operations 911 dispatch, drop the word and? The other is, and I guess I need Dennis and Mike to help me with this, is to change the copy to improve the safety of county residents and stop early release of inmates. Well, by acquiring and constructing, I have no idea what acquire means.
Acquiring was left in because of the original
Right.
language, and we didn't know if that was a legal requirement or not.
That's right. So to me, acquire means I go out and buy something, or I go to Amador and get their new jail and bring it over here. It didn't have any meaning to me, so I'd like clarification.
So you're talking about eliminating by acquiring and?
Well, unless there's some legal reason, maybe I look to,
The real meat of
And-
it, though, is I think to change the wording from what we had, and we're trying to line this up with what
the survey.
GIG tells us.
That's right.
And so we kind of wanted to go with a new County of Calaveras jail and support service facility,
Facilities.
and qualify for state matching
Matching
funds.
funds, etc.
Just to cut it
Keep it
down,
really simple.
make it simple.
Do you have any thoughts, Jeff?
You're going to buy the property with the bond money, I think you have to use that word, or you're not empowered to buy it.
Well, I don't think we are.
No, actually,
that's a
no.
good point.
I think that's a good point, Jeff. One of the things you'll see in the next probably 6 weeks or so, the county will be issuing certificates of participation based on tobacco securitization money if the board so support, and those funds will be used partially to acquire the land that we're looking for in this process.
Could I ask the board, and I don't know how this works, so you're going to have to tell me, but and maybe you can't do it, but we need, I guess the bond attorney, somebody to approve this, or maybe you guys just approve it today, the language we've submitted versus the language that's in your packet. Can we do
Well,
that?
I like Marita's suggestion where we approve it subject to the CAO and yourself coming up with definitive language.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's fine. But I want to go back to Jeff's issue for just a minute, if I may. And that is, I think we should include language in the bond that does allow for the purchase of property, just in case we do need that, or in case the match is greater than what we anticipate. Then, we don't have to use the certificate of participation money to purchase property. I would be more comfortable leaving that in the language so that we have the greatest amount of flexibility, given we don't know what, we haven't, the grant isn't in hand, and the certificates of participation haven't been done. And so there's a lot of uncertainty here. So it seems to me it would be wise to allow the greatest degree of discretion if possible.
So we want to leave by acquiring in the bond measure.
I would leave that in the bond measure,
Okay.
if that's what's necessary, so that we have the option of using some of the bond money or for the purchase, either using some bond money and some other money, or just bond money, or whatever, depending on what happens with, I don't think it's, has CSAC definitively said they're going to have allow for certificates of participation on the tobacco funds, Tom?
We're not choosing to go the CSAC route. Their costs are higher. We think we can do a better job with government financial strategies, and we'll be bringing you an alternative proposal.
Well, I would just keep our options sort of open, because I wouldn't want to lose something because we foreclosed an option, and there's no place else to go.
So I guess my recommendation initially would be to leave it as we all see it in our board packet, except after a new County of Calaveras Sheriff's Jail and support services facilities to help qualify for state matching funds. Shall the County of Calaveras issue 31 million of bonds at interest rates within the statutory limit. So that would be my recommendation.
Would you still want to recommend that the CAO and the sheriff be
Yes.
allowed to?
In fact, I don't mind amending that and say the CAO, the sheriff, and Marito.
That's fine.
So let the three of them get down and work out the wording.
Because there's only a yes or a no vote on this. There is no, as they pointed out, there's no options here. Can't ask questions. The other thing we want to consider is if the board supports this, that any campaigning cannot be done on county time or county resources. So
That's by
we
state
need
law.
to be real clear. That goes for the sheriff's staff and all county staff. Well, the sheriff can.
Does that include eligibility workers?
No. So
Okay.
I guess that's my motion on the resolution calling for the measure as
Okay.
modified, approved by the sheriff, the CAO,
And yourself?
and myself.
Okay, I'll second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries on a 5-0. Here we go. This is a little, I don't think this is campaigning, what I want to say next. I guess somebody will let me know if it is. But because we have quite a few people here, and hopefully some people watch this on television, I was talking with the sheriff before the meeting started about their getting into the tourist business. And it's really telling to visit this facility. And I would encourage everyone to try to make their associates, their friends, and whoever aware of the fact that the sheriff will accommodate tours of this jail based on appointment. And I think that over the course of the next few months, if people are so inclined to take a tour of that jail, it will really be an eye-opener, folks. This facility is way, way long past its useful life. It's almost disgusting. It's not just bad for the folks that are incarcerated there, but the safety of your law enforcement people is in dire jeopardy. So I would encourage groups, individuals, or whomever to contact the sheriff's office to see about taking a tour of the jail. I think it's very telling. So at this point, Tom, we'll move on to item number 4. Is that correct?
Since your board has given us an affirmative vote on moving forward with this bond, the next item before us then is to hire bond counsel. There is a contract for bond counsel. Those fees will be funded through the proceeds of the bond sale, so there is no immediate impact. As Supervisor Callaway likes to remind me, everything originally is general fund money, even though it is paid for out of a bond. But if we can have an affirmative vote on the bond council, we'll get started with the next steps of what we need to do. Now, I will reiterate with you that if this bond is successful in November and the sheriff does go through and apply for the state funds, this bond will not be sold till probably summer of 2008. So this does not have an immediate impact on the tax rolls for most of the citizens. I'm sure that will all be clarified by the committee that works in educating the voters on this issue, but this is not something for those people that are in the audience or on television watching us, that because it gets adopted in November, it's not going to be immediately on your tax bills.
So as Mr. Edwards said, the payments follow the year, rather than...
Payments follow, and we have a number of hurdles to go through before we get to that point, but this is, as the film says, this is about baby steps, and we're taking baby steps and moving forward.
I just want to point out, bond counsel will not be needed if the bond does not pass.
That's correct.
So then it would not be.
But if we bring it
general
back, the contract remains in place.
fund. If the
If
bond.
subsequent.
Yes.
Okay.
Just a quick
Go
question
ahead,
on this.
Steve.
How do we select bond counsel services? What makes these guys the best? Are there relative costs and efficiencies? Just trying to make sure that there's never a process issue in relation to a bond election.
That actually was, that's a very good question. We did work through our county council and through government financial strategies. This was a negotiated contract. The original price was it's a little bit higher than this, but we were able to, working with other members of the team, achieve this contract. We think they're an important member of the team. They're familiar with all of the parties we're working with, and we think it's not only the most cost-effective, but it is the right members to have on the team for what we're trying to accomplish.
And I did do a due diligence process, made several phone calls to people I know, solicited recommendations, and I support this recommendation.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? I'll entertain a motion for the minute order to award this contract to KMTG.
Also moved, Mr. Chair.
A second.
Under discussion, may I just make one comment?
Sure.
I think we need to have some clarity on the earlier motion, which was a resolution to approve the order, but the order was for $20 per 100,000 valuation. Is that correct?
That's approximately what it will equal, about $19.
It's 18 and some change, I think.
Because I think people need to know.
Yeah,
what we just
it's
did
in this
there.
data.
That's the essence of that earlier,
Yeah.
is what the assessment will be, and it's just
Right.
fractionally under $20 per 100,000
I think
valuation.
that's a prediction, but it's not.
Yeah.
It won't be part of the ballot measure.
Right? It's the total amount, and that depends
is
on
whatever it
valuations
is.
at the date of this.
Lori can correct me, it's not part of the measure, but it's part of the financial disclosure that we have to do.
When you put this on the ballot, you're authorized.
Excuse me, Lori, would you again identify yourself for the record?
Sure, I'm sorry. I'm Lori Ranieri with Government Financial Strategies. When you put the bond measure on the ballot, because this is a general obligation bond, you're asking the voters to approve a bond amount and the purposes of that bond. The limitation on the tax rate comes from the way taxes are calculated. And Jonathan showed you it's a simple division. The annual debt service is shared by the entire tax base. We make a prediction of what we think the tax rates will be, and you saw those graphs. We projected the tax rate in every single year until the bonds are paid off. That, what you saw graphically, will be translated into a document called the tax rate statement, which was published in the ballot, and that is a projection, as County Council Jones indicated, but that's information to the taxpayer, or to the voter actually, about what the impact will be. I would imagine that there'll be a public information campaign that helps people to understand what the impact will be from their perspective. And there is a practical limitation. The tax rate can only be so high if you're approving $31 million worth of bonds and you have the tax base that you have. But in a general obligation bond, there is no limitation on the taxes themselves. It's limited by the amount of bonds and the way that burden is distributed. And so when I say there's no limitation, practically, it's like we know the distance from the earth to the sun. Do you know what I mean? It could be something more, it could be something less, but we know what it is, right? Well, we know what the tax rates should be, and we use a very conservative set of assumptions, as you saw when Jonathan went through that, to provide assurance that we would not experience tax rates higher than projected because we've been so conservative in our assumptions. That's the reason that we are conservative. Because you could argue the other way, why not be aggressive? You don't want to leave money on the table. Well, we don't want to take any risk that those tax rates will be higher than what people expect. And I would defer to the county treasurer tax collector to share with you the kind of phone calls she gets after the tax bills go out. There are people who have a lot of questions and don't understand, but I would dare say it's a significant minority of the community that make those calls, but probably somewhat vocal. So, yeah.
They certainly were polled, apparently.
I think one of the things that maybe wasn't made clear in the presentation is that the legal, political, and financial considerations to meet the overriding need for a jail. The need for the jail started with the sheriff being an incredible advocate for this need. And all of the other parameters, the political, financial, and legal sort of came together. Politically, what can we do? That was the purpose of the survey. Legally, what's allowed? That was County Council Jones and John Christie from Chronic Moskowitz, who's here today, figuring out legally what we can do. Financially, it was our firm saying, okay, if this is the legal, these are the legal limitations, this is what people will pay, can we make this work with this budget? And in all honesty, it may seem like magic that when the poll says you need to be close to the $18, $19 range, and we're there with the budget that we have, it isn't magic. It was everything being squeezed, you know, the water balloon being squeezed on all sides until we got something together that was a total package. So yes, it meets the parameters of the poll, it meets the legal requirements, and it meets the budget requirements of the jail. Now, one thing obviously is once everything is set in motion, we've passed the bond, we apply for the state money. If there's a cost overrun somewhere, we don't, as you know, increases in expenses don't necessarily bring an increase in revenues. You know, our budget is set, and we have to make this money go as far as we can. And one of the ways we do that is getting that state money.
Okay, thank you very much, Lloyd. Any other discussion? We have a motion and a second for this minute order for the contract. Hearing no further discussion, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And do you have anything further, Tom?
No, I would just like to thank the Board of Supervisors for taking the time to come here today and have this special meeting. I know you all had other plans, but thank you for taking the time to come today. Thank each of the members of our team, both our consultants, county staff, sheriff's department, debt advisory. Everybody has pulled together with a magnificent effort to get to where we are today, and just want to personally compliment everybody.
Dennis.
Yeah, I just want you to know the first recorded document we can find indicating the need for a new jail was submitted by Sheriff Claude Ballard in 1986. And so this has been a long-standing process.
Wow.
And I really want to thank this board for stepping up. We've got a good shot here. We'll work as hard as we can to make this thing work. And I really particularly want to thank Marita. She has done an awful lot in the last 10 years to educate herself about issues that I'm sure that she never wanted to be interested in. And she's been a wonderful help. Thank you very, very much.
Well, Dennis, do you truly believe a new jail comes before the assessor's needs?
Okay. That's it. Listen, I want to thank the rest of you folks, too, for your interest, and I'm going to ask that all of you be an advocate for this. This particular thing is not a baby step. This is a leap of faith, and we really need to try to see if we can bring this to fruition. I think that concludes our business for today, so this meeting's adjourned.